Hiya, hello once again and welcome to part 6 of my channel. For this first part of the channel, I think I ought to discuss the book that I wrote in 2013 because there's a lot of reference in Bonita Trimmer's witness statement referring to the book. So it'd be advisable to explain that book to you at this moment in time. I didn't want to because it seems like I'm advertising something I've already done. Well, that's not the case. Matter of fact, I think I only sold 2 copies up to date anyway. Here's the book. It's called Divinity and Spirituality of a Seventh Born. And it's about my dysfunctional family from the day I was born to present day, really, I suppose. And all the weird things that happened in the house because it was a strange house and there was some strange happenings. My mum being from the travelling fraternity. But you'd have to read the book to know all about this. And in that book was an article about my bankruptcy. This is where Bonita Trimmer got the bankruptcy from. She says she got it from the Gazette, but that's not the case. In the meeting in November 2017 with Barker Battelle in London, if you remember, I showed you this recording stick, and at that meeting I'd explained to her about the book, so that's where Wolverhampton Wanderers solicitors got the information from. Obviously they read the book, knowing it was an autobiography, trying to get information to use against me. Well, I'm squeaky clean, I'm sorry to say, because I had to work for the police. I did a lot of work for the police when I was a contractor, and I did work for the Ministry of Defence. And believe me, you have to be vetted by them. They go back about 4 generations. If there's any murderers or rapists or whatever in the family, you don't get in. So, you know, you've got to be sort of really kosher. Anyway, she said she got this information from the Gazette. Now, if you remember me telling you, when Ron and I first did the research at Wolverhampton Archives, it took us 7 to 8 months of going practically every day, and we only researched 3 or 4 months of Express and Stars, Chronicles and other papers there, local papers which we knew, which I knew where the original painting art competition was. I knew it was going to be one of them local papers, so that was a point of reference. Now, my reason for saying this is, to find such things as a bankruptcy, you've got to, unless it's recent of course, you've got to have a point of reference. Don't forget, this bankruptcy of mine was 1996, 22 years prior. So if she says, as she said, she searched through the Gazette, it wouldn't be the Gazette now, it'd have to be the Gazette in 1998. So you'd have to have an idea, and then you'd have to kind of search through every single Gazette from this present day to 1998. Now that'd take a hell of a long time, believe me. Actually, it's basically impossible. And that's the reason why I know she got the information from the book. The reason why she said she got the information from the Gazette is that in 2015 she tried to accuse me of approaching the insolvency people to glean information to prepare my case, which is absolutely rubbish. She accused my solicitors of not being forthcoming in finding out about my bankruptcy, but neither did they ask about the bankruptcy, neither did Barker Battelle ask about the bankruptcy, neither did any other solicitors ask about any bankruptcy whatsoever. So that's another thing she tried to bring up and to try to accuse people of. She tried to accuse the insolvency people of negligence from her calls, but believe me, those insolvency people are brilliant. The guy who ran the insolvency company, when I spoke to him in 2018 after I found out from my solicitor that the bankruptcy did matter, because this bat woman had rung up my solicitor and said, oh, you can't go to court, he doesn't own the copyright. The insolvency people still own it. Well, apparently, if you're made bankrupt, the insolvency people own everything. Now, you wouldn't believe this. I mean, in the book, I'd put she mentions a couple of quotes in the statement about everything gone forever, everything lost, all that sort of thing. But you wouldn't have thought that the insolvency people own the cigarette cards you collected when you was a kid, and your nappies and all that sort of thing. Who would have thought? Who would have thought in this present era that if you're made bankrupt like next week, they own everything from the day you was born? Anyway, as I said, she tried to accuse me of 2015 doing research. Now, two things about 2015. As you know, I never discovered the documentation till late 2015. And this is confirmed in one of the latest statements, the last statements of Bonita Trimmer, when I got in touch with some of the websites, the fan sites, asking if anybody knew about who designed the warfare. Well, that was just part of my research. I also searched, there was a chap on there called Ackleton Wolf, and I thought, well, how can I get in touch with him? And I looked through the maps on the internet, and there was a place called Ackleton just not far from Covent, so I went to the local pub, said, do you know anybody who goes under the name of Ackleton Wolf? Oh yeah, it's so-and-so up the road. I got in touch with the guy, and he lent me all his 149 copies, I think it was, of a load of bull. I even scanned all them. So that stuff in the back of the documentation of Bonita Trimmer's about trying to find out information was part of my research. Also, in the back of that statement, she said she's read the book. She admits that she read the book, but she just never told anybody when she read it. But all I've got to do is, I know I only sold 2 books of the whole time it's ever been on the net. It's on Amazon if you want to read it, it's up to you. But I've only got to go back to my publisher and say, who bought this book? There's only one sold in 2018. I've only got to go back to Amazon or my publisher say, who bought this book? And it's going to be her. No, it is. And in the book she said, I'd never mentioned anything about the painting competition. Well, this book was written in 2013. The painting competition had gone 40 years back when I wrote it, and the book was about social history and the weird happenings in my family, and all my family, the 9 kids and my stepfather, who was a cruel, brutal sod, and my mother, who I really loved. But I never mentioned anything about the painting competition, no, but I entered loads of competitions. I never mentioned the things I won. I mean, I won a mini cine camera once. It was like a little projector with the levers on, and it projected film onto the wall, and that's where I learned about the 7 wonders of the world from that. I won some tickets to the Panto once as well. I never mentioned all that. Never mentioned the paper rounds and all the social work thing. I only mentioned the important things that were relevant at the time. I mean, the warfare, as far as I was concerned, was in cyberspace. If I'd have come to you in a book and said, oh yeah, I designed that warfare, it'd be like the solicitor said to me when I first went to him, well Pete, if you hadn't brought this information to me, your original design drawings, I'd have just told you to clear off. And so, you know, it's like the old fisherman story, oh I caught a fish that big, and really it's that big sort of thing. So, you know, that's completely gone over my head. As she says on page 3 of her witness statement, which is there, she searched the London Gazette, which is just rubbish. She would have searched the London Gazette, yes, she would have eventually found it, because they do produce it in the Gazette, they produce all bankruptcies in the Gazette, but my bankruptcy had been produced in the 1998 Gazette. The next thing she says, she goes on to say in paragraph 6, page 4, there. Sorry I've crossed my address out, but I don't want any weirdos coming to my house and sort of throwing West Brom flags at me. This goes on to say that she suspects everything. I mean, suspicion, I suspect there's fairies at the bottom of our garden, but there ain't. Suspicion doesn't stand up in a high court. She said she suspected it as a building contractor, and it was me. Well, it's pretty obvious it was me because it was my name and address was on it. She also says in the next paragraph, paragraph 7, that she invited Keystone Law to answer the question. Well, Lawrence and Keith Downlow, he hadn't got a clue about the bankruptcy. She criticised them for not doing the research. But they never did the research either. They never did any research. Brown Jacobson. Barker Battelle never did any research. Mishcom Duran never did any research. All the other solicitors never did any research. Because who would give it any second consideration? No one would. We got to the next page where she goes on to say that she tried to contact the official receiver over it. Well, and they hadn't replied. Well, I contacted the official receiver after Lawrence from Keystone Law notified me that because of my bankruptcy, I didn't own the copyright of the Wolfhead, so I had to get in touch with the official receiver, who at that time was watching a World Cup match in some foreign country abroad. And the strange thing about it is, it got a flag, you'll probably see it the next time you watch, it got a flag of a Union Jack and on it was a Wolfhead, and I'm looking at the Wolfhead thinking, have you paid for that? You know what I mean? So she then accused the official receivers of being incompetent. Now I know the official receivers, I know when Tim's away, Emma stands in, and believe me, they're on the ball. They wouldn't ignore phone calls from people like that. They're too hot on the ball, and it seems to me she's prepared to run everybody down except herself. The next page is page 6. Article 12, where she goes on to say she contacted a Sarah as regards to my bankruptcy files. Alex Zapowski, who was a young lad, apprentice lad, who I met once, he was a lovely, sorry, I shouldn't say little, he was a lovely chap. And to be honest with you, she goes on to say, Alex was unavailable. My opinion is he just hadn't got the stomach for this because it was all bull anyway. She goes on in this article about Sarah at Wolverhampton and goes on about the bankruptcy and obtaining documents for the bankruptcy, which none existed. So why even bother putting it in? It's just waffle and chaff. It means nothing. See, the whole statement is what I call chaff. Now, for you younger kids who wouldn't know what chaff was, when I was a kid, I used to study the war a lot because you used to read a lot about the war and all this sort of thing. And chaff is what they used to drop over, the bombers used to go over with the bombs, and to confuse the radar, they'd drop what was called chaff, which is sort of an aluminium foil from the bombers, and this had confused the radar, and this is what she's doing. Only the radar's the judge. And it's just a load of absolute rubbish. Some of it's totally meaningless, well, most of it's totally meaningless, and the rest is just rubbish. So we go on now to bottom of that page, where she states that I spoke to Lawrence and I said to Lawrence, once he told me about the bankruptcy and my situation, I said, well, I wasn't aware of this. I mean, if you've done something, been made bankrupt, you're not aware that they own every single thing from the day you was born. Your nappies, your couple of cigarette cards you got. You're only aware of what they own at that present time when you're made bankrupt. It's something interesting for people to sort of look at and see and think, well, if I'm made bankrupt, they own everything. I'm just wondering, do they own your wife as well? Anyway, let's carry on. Right, we've got a big page here, it's page 7. This is where she refers to the book. I'll just scroll. You can look at this clearer on the net sort of thing, because I've done the 22 pages, which if you want to blow up you can, but this is a relevant page to the whole scenario really. And she goes on to say about my Twitter 7born handle, which is 7born1 at Twitter, which I'm going to answer a lot of questions from you all once all this is over. I want you to question and answer me, because I want to tell you anything that I've missed out. I want to explain to you. She goes on to talk about that, and she talks about the book, saying A quote from the book was, freezing all my assets, everything was gone, and they took my private pension and left me with nothing, which they did. But as I said, how would you know they were going to take everything from the day you were born? And as far as the Wolfhead was concerned, she seems to think that's relevant. Well, 40 years had gone since that, and I explained that earlier on. She was just gone, that was it. You wouldn't even consider something like that, would you? Something that was in cyberspace, existed in cyberspace, which I hadn't got no evidence that I owned it anyway. I mean, if I'd have come to you and said I owned the copyright, you'd have just gone, you know, like a lot of people did think, or still probably do think till they see this video, that I'm just a con man. But believe me, I'm not. That's where she said it was incumbent of the solicitors and blah 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 of ignoring my bankruptcy, but nobody did, even they didn't do it, didn't look at the bankruptcy. There's one thing which does amuse me. She's got some more reasonable suspicions here. If you look at that area there with a circle round, she states, it may also be inconsistent with my reasonable suspicion that in 2015 the claimant made an inquiry of the Insolvency Service as to whether bankruptcies which were no longer on the Insolvency Register were kept on the archive. So she's basically insinuating that I knew about the bankruptcy implications and that I was trying to sort of wriggle out of it. Now, first thing I'd say about that is, if I did do the research in 2015, which I've proven to you before, I would have bought the bankruptcy back then so I could give me a clear road. As you know, I didn't start doing the research till late 2015. This was April 2015. I didn't start doing my research till I found the documents at Ron's till, according to Bonita Tremor, November 2015. Anyway, let's put that back down. Let's carry on with Bonita Tremor's mixed up statement. She then goes on to the next sections from page 8 onwards. Basically confirm everything I've ever said. It's a statement from Matthew Wild, the club's company secretary. I met Matthew at the non-disclosure meeting, nice chap, and it just confirms everything I ever said about the club. It absolutely matches what I said about my part of designing the logo. And don't forget, the judge authenticated my original design. Entering the painting competition was never confirmed because the judge wouldn't accept it, but we'll talk about that later on. And then from Wolverhampton Wonders, from this present day, it all comes together perfect. It's a perfect story. And then we have this Ian Jackson, who we're going to have a real good long talk about later on. He, to me, is the person who transported my design to Wolverhampton Wonders. But I'll put the proof to you and you can look at it later on. And there's just one more thing in this lettering, which I've probably missed some things out of it, but there's just one more thing in this, and that's they did research. If you look from pages, it's basically 12 to 17, 18, well, 12 to 19, they did research on all the people of the club. And most of them are dead. So why they put research on there about dead people is beyond me. It's just sort of more chaff and more waffle to produce to the court. But there were two people in this statement who made a couple of statements. And one of them was called John Goff and the other one was Tony Marshall. Now, there they are. They are still alive. Now, John Goff, I know him. He had a building. He's got a tin pot building company in Bilston, and I did some work for him once. And well, I don't want to say anything about the guy, but as I said to you before, my mum always said, if you've got nothing good to say, don't say anything bad. So we'll just leave it at that with John Goff. Now, if you look at this witness statement, Tony Marshall goes on to say, he didn't know anything about Bernard Brett, he didn't know anything about anything, and there it is. But, and this is one of the main planks of the defence, his case, I taped a conversation of Tony Marshall. Once I found out about Tony Marshall, and I'd spoken to Alan Evans in Australia, and realised more or less it wasn't Alan Evans' dad. I spoke to Mrs. Marshall, Alan Evans' mum, and in one of them conversations, we had a couple of conversations that I explained earlier on, she actually told me that Bernard and Alan were friends, and they were friends with Harry Marshall at the club. And she smiled. I could tell she was telling the truth because she's got this little smile like, you know, an old person, and memory goes back to a happy time. But Wolverhampton Wanderers said this was rubbish, and unlucky for me, I didn't tape that conversation, but I taped other conversations. And I taped I rang this Tony Marshall, the son of Harry Marshall, who'd got an engineering company. I think I looked at the obituary of his late father, it stated that of the engineering company. I managed to get in touch with him. Well, I taped him on this, my same dictaphone sort of tape, the same one that I taped the non-disclosure meeting in London, which I shouldn't have done, but I did. Now, when I produced that tape to court, which I'm going to play you in the next episode, you'll see that this statement from this guy is not true. And his wife backs him up, and this John Goff backs him up. So what in actual fact is this recording on here proves that they weren't telling the truth. Now, the defence have got to twist this to make on that it was me who was telling lies. So what they actually did was they asked for a copy of this recording of Tony Marshall, right, which I sent to my solicitor, Lawrence Abramson. He sent it to them. I didn't send this original one because of their previous record. They were underhanding this from previous meetings we'd had, sort of the library in Birmingham, and a couple of the first meeting I had one where they asked me all the questions and then sort of told me after they represented Wall. So I was a bit aware of these people. So from then on I decided to tape everything I could, and then with the regret of not taping Alan Evans' mum, I really taped everything from then on. I sent them a copy of this just to show them like what that statement from Tony Marshall was rubbish. I didn't send my original stick because I just didn't trust him. I don't trust him. I sent him a copy on an ordinary stick, sent him a solicitor. He sent it to them. They wrote back and said it's corrupt. The whole recording's corrupt. So they sent me a printout copy of the recording, and it was a mess. So I sent him another one. My solicitor sent that stick to them again, Brown Jacobson. They said that was corrupt. There was digits and dots and this and that and all over the voice recording, which was convenient for them. Anyhow, when I got to court, they told the judge that they'd had five copies of this off me, and every one of them was corrupt. Now, I only ever sent them 2, so who corrupted the other 3? I never got to the bottom of it, I never found out. But they produced it in court, and they made me look a liar. Now, when I play this, you'll hear, there's one blip on this where I turned the phone up. I recorded this from this conversation from a phone. It's one of them handheld BT things, you know, you can take off the phone and walk around the house with. And while he was talking to me, Tony Marshall, I pressed it, he blipped and knocked a bit of the first word out. And obviously they took that and expanded it through the whole recordings which they played in court. And to be honest with you, it looked as though somebody had been tampering with the recording, but it wasn't me. And this put an element of doubt in the judge's head as far as he was concerned. I know more about it than I'm saying. Well, I do know more about it than I was saying in the court, because I wasn't going to send them my original copy. I just didn't trust them. I just didn't trust them all. They just sort of wiped it, or it had disappeared, and I had no evidence at all. And not only that, I've got the non-disclosure meeting on there, so then they tore me to pieces on that as well, saying, oh, this man can't be trusted, and he's recorded this meeting when it's against the law and all this sort of thing. So I decided I was going to keep my original, and that's what I did. And that's what I've got now as my evidence, even now to this date. And finally, to conclude, this article which is page 21, confirms that everything I said is the truth. So basically this witness statement is really good for me, because she's actually helped me and confirmed everything. She dates that I did the research on the 6th of November 2015, which aligns perfectly with what I said to you about moving into the house in September and then finding the documents. So a story is about me trying to get in touch with the insolvency people in April 2015, and then she turns around and starts telling people that I started doing research in late 2015. It just doesn't add up. But until you look at this documentation and really scrutinise it, you would never think, because when they produce these things in court, they're rattled off and rattled off. You never have a chance to look at these things or analyse these things. And being sort of with this cancer problem over the months and this COVID, I've had a chance to analyse all this stuff, look at it in depth, and bring it to you, people of Wolverhampton, the fans. Finally, the whole 21 pages just confirms everything I said. There's a bit of waffle and chaff chucked in there just to support her story, but none of it's 99% of it's true, and 89% of it's just drivel. All it does is just confirms everything I said. Now, as far as the one thing I want to add as well, as far as the stick, the recording of Tony Marshall's concerned, when we came out of the prelim trial, which was around about August 2018, they wanted to look at this stick, so I took it with me to London, and Bonita Trimmer and Alex Zapowski with Ed Bruegel and their barrister at the time we sat down outside the court, and we played them this recording off my computer, off my stick, and they all agreed 100% that it was accurate to the recordings. And then later on, they started saying something totally different. They said, oh, is this, is that, all corrupt and all this. But they just changed their minds. Anyway, the next episode we'll play you this Tony Marshall recording. We'll go through it and I'll explain to it in more detail. And that'll probably lead us then to the Ian Jackson witness statement, which is really, really interesting. So let's end it here, and let's wait for episode 7.